Auspicious blessings to all. Last session, we mainly discussed how the prescriptive aspects of Shila, that is the physical and verbal regulation based on the 5 precepts, prevents immoral impulses and violation of self and others. And we also addressed the different sets of precepts in light of our different levels of aspiration on the path of Buddhist practice, and how they guide our lives towards freedom and peace in this life and beyond. This session, we will be focusing more on the underlying spirits of all the precepts, which is non-harm or avimsa. In a world that is made up of self-balancing portions of happiness and suffering, it is insufficient for us to passively refrain from unwholesomeness. In order to ensure freedom, peace, and joy for ourselves, we need to also extend compassion, loving kindness, and generosity to others through our speech, actions, and mind. Why is this the case, you may ask? Well, let's have a look at the phenomenon of the ripple effect. Have you ever thrown a rock or stone into a pond or lake's quiet waters? Have you seen how the small waves ripple away in circles from the center and continue indefinitely? Every day in our lives, the same thing occurs. Little things we do have ripple effects that can sometimes bring good things to others and sometimes unpleasant things to others, including people we have never met. And eventually, things circle back to us inevitably. One evening, an old guy stood on the bridge, high over a deep river on a lonely country road. He'd just thrown a rock over the railing to test how long it would take for this rock to hit the water, and as he stood there watching the ripples spread, a pickup truck approached. It came to a halt, but the motor was still running. The old man approached the vehicle, and as he glanced through the window, he noticed a man behind the wheel, his head stooped low and his breathing deeply. "Is there anything wrong?" he inquired. "I think I'm having a heart attack," the man replied gently. "I'm attempting to reach the hospital." "Let me help you," said the old man. "You shouldn't be driving like this. The hospital is a good 10 miles away from here." "Oh, thanks," mumbled the man. "I'm Jack. I was all alone at my nursery after my employees had left for the day." "Don't worry, Jack," said the old man. "I'll drive you there." He opened the door, took the wheel, and drove as fast as he could down the road. When they arrived at the emergency entrance to the hospital, the attendants rushed out with a wheelchair and quickly wheeled Jack to the emergency room. The old man waited throughout the night. He knew what it was like to be all alone, without family or friends in times of need. He was, in fact, a widower. He had lived alone since his wife had died several months before. The doctors were able to save Jack's life. They told the old man that Jack would not have survived if he had arrived just a few minutes later. A week passed. Jack was getting well. Several of his employees came to visit, as did the old man. While everyone was gathered around his bedside, Jack took the hand of the old man and said to his employees, "This dear man, gentle, indeed saved my life, though we are perfect strangers. And I want you to know he created a ripple effect in all our lives. By saving my life, he saved my business. By saving my business, he saved the jobs of 30 families. We all owe him so much." There was silence as all eyes turned towards the old man. He gave a gracious smile, but there were tears in his eyes. He gently leaned over the railing of the bed and whispered to Jack, "I must tell you something, Jack. You saved my life. Just about the time you drove up in your truck, I was about to jump off that bridge. Now I know how important every life on earth is to every other. It is just as you said, Jack, the ripple effect. From this story, we understand that our speech, actions, and our thoughts not only have an impact on others, it comes back to us eventually. As we give the best of ourselves to others, not only are we improving the circumstances around us, we are essentially contributing to a better world around us. More so, by giving the best of ourselves selflessly, we are weakening our self-harming ego by taking the welfare of others to be just as important as one's own welfare. And because of this, the more we uphold the prescriptive guidelines for morality, we are essentially working towards better relationships with others and inner peace all at the same time. This session will focus on the prescriptive aspects of Shila, while briefly discussing the preclusive aspects of the Bodhisattva precepts, which are seen to be predominantly prescriptive in nature. We may recall the three manifestations of Shila being the inner virtue, which includes our kindness, contentment, simplicity, and truthfulness, patience, and so forth, which comes naturally without intervention. And then, of course, we also remember that there are virtuous actions of body and speech which are inspired by such inner virtue. And rules of conduct, whether prescriptive or proscriptive, work to lead us towards bringing our body and speech in alignment with this inner virtue so that we are able to engage in virtuous actions as our minds become pure. We also remember that there are two values of precepts. The first one being prescriptive, meaning right performance or charita, and then proscriptive, which means right avoidance. We may also recall from our last session the analogy of weeding lawn, whereby proscriptive precepts work to weed out those nasty weeds from our lawn. It will lead to having bare patches of dirt where we need to replace this bare patch with more grass, more lawn. So this is where the prescriptive aspects of the precepts come into play. We are actively building or constructing wholesome, active mental processes which build and become habitual to replace those bare patches left behind by the weeds. The upholding of prescriptive aspects of Shila actively engages the wholesome active mental states and conditions the subconscious tendencies in a wholesome manner. Just as bad habits may be picked up, good habits may be developed as well. And Buddhist teachings such as the physical and verbal aspects of the Noble Eightfold Path and Bodhisattva precepts provide practical guidelines for how to proactively engage in the verbal and physical actions that bring goodness to self and others. The Noble Eightfold Path includes right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. But in terms of Shila or morality, there are three. So it's right speech, action, and livelihood. Apart from refraining from things like lying, swearing, coarse speech, and actions like killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and so forth, and engaging in livelihoods which are harmful for others, the Eightfold Path actually inspires us or reminds us to actively do the opposite. So when it comes to right action, it means correct actions with our body, which may include helping others or planting trees, doing anything that brings about wholesomeness and benefit to others as well as the greater community. So there are many things we can do to put our actions in accord with inner Shila. anything that is inspired by compassion, loving kindness, generosity, patience, and so forth. All these actions inspired by wholesome mental attitudes, if done correctly, are part of right action. Right speech means that not only do we refrain from that which brings harm upon others verbally, we also use our speech to the benefit of humanity. We encourage people who need it, we give support verbally, we say nice things, and of course we speak the truth with our voice. So anything that brings wholesomeness to others and society in general is considered good speech. As for right livelihood, this includes several aspects. When it comes to the way we make money or the way we make a living, as we say, it means that we engage in occupations that bring benefit to others and no harm at all. So, for example, if we worked at a casino, would this be considered right livelihood? Well, perhaps if we consider the fact that gambling can ruin families and make people broke, and gambling is probably not considered something which is beneficial to society, then of course, a profession that includes gambling is probably not so righteous. And even engaging in livelihoods that deceive people, that work on deceiving people through speech, is also considered not correct livelihood. So what is right livelihood? Right livelihood is anything that helps others. Teaching professions, engineering, medicine, all those good professions which bring about goodness to others. People working in construction, people working in the service industry, people working at the service station, offering services to others. All these are considered good ways of livelihood. But livelihood is not limited to the way we make money. Livelihood also entails lifestyle. Righteous lifestyle means that we have regulated food and drink intake, regulated sleep, regulated senses, and just in general, a regulated lifestyle. So what do we mean by a regulated intake of food and drink? It means that we have enough to maintain the body healthily, but we do not overly indulge and we do not crave food all the time, because all this leads to the deepening of these habitual tendencies of greed, which are latent tendencies and are triggered by us allowing the senses to roam free and attach to everything that it comes across. So good food and drink intake also means that we're less prone to illness, which is a hindrance to our practice. So right livelihood also includes right lifestyle, and that means good food and drink intake. When it comes to sleep, this is also something important, because when we have sufficient sleep, we are able to function in a good state, in a very effective way. And of course, our moral judgment is also at its peak when we have enough sleep. But likewise, if we have too much and become slothful, and if we have a lot of torpor, then it also means that we are not engaging in our Buddhist practice with diligence. When it comes to restraint with the senses, it's a very similar thing when it comes to controlling our food and drink intake, not allowing ourselves to be led by the nose of greed and desire to certain foods and drinks. This all lessens our attachment to these senses, and it plays down on our active mental emotions of greed. And what happens is it backtracks. It stops our mental actions from triggering the latent tendencies of greed towards things in general. So this greed, as we have mentioned several sessions ago, is universal. But the way the mind manifests this latent tendency is different. And then as we come across the different objects of desire, this active mental state reacts differently. But by keeping a good lifestyle, it means that we're slowly keeping check on our active mental states and making sure that we're geared towards wholesomeness. Last session, we also talked about the precepts in terms of aspiration on the Buddhist path of practice and the ultimate search for happiness and peace and freedom. So whereas someone who has just begun with Buddhism may start with taking refuge and then further the practice by maintaining prescriptive precepts to keep one on track, one will also make the step to go further and take the prescriptive aspects of the precept, and that is mainly based on the Bodhisattva precepts. The Bodhisattva path leads to ultimate peace and happiness as one sees the welfare of all beings equally and is free of the discriminating mind that leads to dissatisfaction. If one loves all sentient beings the way one loves oneself, it is impossible for this person to hate, and there will be no suffering, and inner peace will be firm. Last session, we also talked about the precepts of morality in terms of the different levels of aspiration towards the path of freedom and happiness. We recall that for a beginner to Buddhism, taking refuge is the entry point, whereby one adds to the practice by upholding the 5 precepts, the prescriptive aspects which guide us in the correct way of behaving to align the mind with purity. But then one will continue on the Buddhist path by taking the Bodhisattva precepts, which is one step further in purifying the mind and finding this ultimate happiness. When one treads the Bodhisattva path, one sees the welfare of all beings equally and is free of the discriminating mind that leads to dissatisfaction. If one loves all sentient beings the same way one loves oneself, it is impossible for this person to hate, and there will be no suffering, and inner peace will be established. Let us first come to an understanding of the word bodhisattva. Bodhi means to awaken, and sattva means sentient beings. Therefore, bodhisattva means a sentient being who is seeking awakening. Bodhisattvas are those who practice in a way leading to the full understanding of the reality of self and things, fully knowing that all beings are equal with oneself, and perfects his or her spiritual path by selflessly benefiting others. By benefiting all beings who are of different inclinations, needs, and personalities, the Bodhisattva comes to understand that Dharma very completely, since in the process of helping beings, the Bodhisattva must learn through observation the myriad expedient means required to successfully help others, and as such, all manifestations of the Dharma are illuminated in the minds of the Bodhisattva. Consider the analogy of the university lecturer teaching business management to a culturally diverse audience, whereby this lecturer that we're talking about may be an expert in his field of business management. It is impossible for this lecturer to be the best lecturer if he is unable to put himself in the shoes of different cultures, to be able to generalize his model of business management across all the different scenarios that he may find himself in. And the more that he is able to understand all the different scenarios which require business management, then his model of business management becomes universal. And this is true for a bodhisattva. A Bodhisattva may understand one aspect of the Dharma, but unable to understand it through different facets or different scenarios. And because one is unable to see all the different scenarios in which the Dharma is manifested in life, then this understanding is not complete. And in the bigger picture of things, as we work towards developing this wisdom which truly brings happiness to self and others, then this Bodhisattva is not complete. Since it is difficult for someone new to the path of Buddhism to fathom what it takes to be a Bodhisattva, the Bodhisattva precepts were established, offering practical guidelines for everyday living. The Sutra on Upasaka precepts lays out the moral guidelines that lay Buddhists follow. It thoroughly elucidates the content, practice, and essence of the lay Bodhisattva's moral code and underlines the relevance of lay Bodhisattva practice. It is based on the fundamental spirit of non-harm and compassion and is concerned with preventing trouble even before it arises. This is a relatively unique approach to life, since from a cause and effect perspective, the Bodhisattva is concerned about the cause of all phenomena, while most others usually do not recognize the causal relationships of things and are left to deal with the effects after the fact. The Bodhisattva precepts for lay people include 6 major and 28 minor precepts. And within this set of precepts, there are both proscriptive and prescriptive precepts. But for now, I'll be talking more on the prescriptive aspects. So let's bring to the table several of these precepts which really demonstrate the prescriptive aspects of what it means to be a Bodhisattva. So the first minor precept, the precept against failure to make offerings to our parents, teachers, and elders. So one may think, why do we need to make offerings to our parents, teachers, and elders? Well, from a Buddhist point of view, the teachings are carried on the backs of humility. So if we want to learn the Dharma and learn it thoroughly and practice it, then our minds need to be geared towards humility. And a way to do so is to conjure inside our minds this sense of respect for those who are guiding us, for those who have given us a lot, and to give rise to this mind of gratitude as we do so. So with this mind of gratitude and this mind of humility, we are able to receive the teachings in a more complete manner. So this is something which is of a prescriptive nature. It means that we need to make offerings to our parents, teachers, and elders. The third minor precept is against failure to care for the sick. What it means is that when there is a need, and if we're able to help, then of course we should not hesitate to help those who are ill. And especially in times like now where COVID is still rampant, there are many people requiring support. And with the premise that we are able to maintain our own health, it doesn't really hurt to help others who need our support. And us having experienced being ill ourselves, we can really relate to the need for the comfort and support of others, especially in our time of need. The fourth precept is against failure to be charitable to people in need. So it may be helping our neighbor out, it may be helping friends out when they need. It also means that we help those who are disadvantaged, those who cannot have 3 meals on the table, helping people just overcome their dire straits in their hour of need so that they can carry on and rebuild their lives. And I'm sure this is something which is relevant wherever we are in this world, because even in the great country of America, there are many people who do not have 3 meals on the tables. There are people who are not dressed appropriately for the weather because of their financial situation. And the Buddha-Dharma precepts ask of us to do this proactively. The 7th minor precept is against failure to uphold or observe the 6 days of vegetarian fasting and holding the precepts. It means that for at least 6 days a month, we try to maintain a vegetarian diet. And the whole idea behind this is, as we become vegetarian or we work towards becoming full-time vegetarians, we are giving rise to a mind of compassion, because the whole purpose of becoming vegetarian is not to deprive animals their rights to lives. And by doing so slowly and subconsciously, this compassion is also generalized to not just animals, but humans in general. The 8th minor precept is against failure to go to listen to the Dharma. So in our quest for happiness and peace, and in purifying this mind so we can work to the ultimate goal of enlightenment in Buddhism, it's important that we continually expose ourselves to the teachings, because every time we hear something of the Dharma, and as our wisdom develops innately, we learn new things, and then we continue to work on developing more wisdom, more compassion, and more morality as we embrace the Dharma in our minds and allow it to grow within us. The 28th minor precept is that against abandoning sick people we encounter while traveling. So this is a situation which is probably not so relevant in the 21st century, keeping in mind that these precepts were established a long time ago. But there are many parallels. There are people who are in destitute situations we meet as we travel, and it doesn't hurt to just go out of our way to help this person if the need is there to do so. So all these precepts that we have mentioned so far are prescriptive precepts, and these work to lead us towards purification of our active mental states. We may now turn our attention to the preclusive aspects of the Bodhisattva precepts, those precepts that work to prevent wrongdoings, to prevent situations where misunderstandings may arise, and also to prevent future danger or future problems for others. So these precepts do not necessarily prevent wrongdoing or immediate wrongdoing, but they're preclusive in nature. So the second minor precept is against indulging in intoxicants, drugs, and stimulants for pleasure. So just like the 5 precepts, is a very similar thing. We avoid intoxicating ourselves only for the purpose of maintaining a clear mind so that we can uphold morality properly. The 6th minor precept is against becoming arrogant when we see members of the Fourfold Assembly, the monks and nuns and lay Buddhist ladies and men. We avoid becoming arrogant when we see members of the Fourfold Assembly violate the precepts. So what it means is, practice is a very personal affair, and it is unwise and it's unfair to judge others based on what we expect of others as a Buddhist. The only thing we can really do as a practicing Buddhist is to place expectation on ourselves and encourage fellow Buddhists, but it is probably not fair to kind of have a standard on others and kind of see them through the lens of such standards and then become judgmental. It doesn't do us any good. It does not do the other person any good. So this is a preclusive precept for preventing hostility towards others and hostility in our own minds. The 11th minor precept is against traveling alone through dangerous places. By doing this, we're actually just preventing the opportunity for others to harm us, to rob us, or to do nasty things to us. Because from a Buddhist perspective, if someone steals from us, it means that we are not careful enough with our belongings to prevent this from happening. So when someone steals from us, they are creating karma. But as a Bodhisattva, we try to take away the cause of stealing in the first place. So it means that we avoid having ourselves alone in a dangerous situation. So this applies for ladies and men in the same way. We do not go to dangerous places alone to avoid confrontations and to avoid other people creating karma. So this is all out of compassion. The 12th minor precept is against staying overnight unchaperoned in a convent or a monastery. What it means is, for monks and nuns, we live celibate lifestyles, and for our devotees to come and stay overnight by themselves, there's always a risk of suspicion, and there's always the risk of unwanted attention and things going wrong, especially with a celibate order. And this is very similar to the way teachers at school should avoid having one-on-one situations alone with students of either the same gender or opposite gender, just because we're trying to avoid suspicion. And when there's suspicion, of course, it just ruins people's integrity, and there's no need for that. And then the 15th minor precept is against keeping cats or other predatory animals. So this actually is a situation where cats like to run around all the time, and any animal which has a predatory instinct also likes to roam around. And when we are not around, sometimes they go out and kill other animals. So what it means is, as a Bodhisattva, we are trying to avoid situations where our pets are killing other animals. So because of this, the easiest way is to slowly refrain from keeping animals which will kill other animals. The 18th minor precept is against failure to look for pure water to irrigate land crops. So this has a very practical aspect to it. If we use polluted or contaminated water to water our plants or our produce, then those who are consuming this produce will be prone to becoming unhealthy. So this is out of compassion for those consuming the crops that we grow. Also, it also means that as we look for pure water to irrigate land crops, we are preventing the killing of bugs, because with water which is dirty, it's bound to have mosquito larvae in it. And then of course with this, as we water it, these larvae will die. So this whole understanding of using pure water is purely out of compassion for the health of others and for the life of insects. In presenting the prescriptive precepts in a practical and all-encompassing manner, Venerable Master Xing Yun explains that spiritual cultivation starts from cultivating wholesome physical, verbal, and mental deeds. The 3 ways to purify body, speech, and mind are to do wholesome actions, speak wholesome words, and think wholesome thoughts. As such, he advocates the 3 acts of goodness: to do good deeds, speak good words, and think good thoughts. And this kind of wraps up the prescriptive aspects of all precepts, and whereby we may feel overwhelmed by the Bodhisattva precepts. As we begin our practice of Buddhism, it's okay. We've got the 5 precepts, we've got the aspects of the Eightfold Path, and then we have the 3 acts of goodness to guide us along the prescriptive practice of morality. So instead of just passively refraining from killing, stealing, lying, and engaging in sexual misconduct and getting intoxicated, we proactively engage in wholesome behavior that tends to develop wholesome active mental actions and replace unwholesome ones. As we proactively align our action and speech to wholesomeness, compassion, loving kindness, and wisdom, we are essentially constructing healthy and peaceful mental states, since the outer manifestations of the mind work to influence the central manifestations of the mind. And because of this, the active mental states become less attached to the ego, and one naturally becomes more and more peaceful and happy as we focus more on the welfare of others. More so as we bring positivity to the world around us. This positivity will cause ripple effects that sooner or later will be felt by oneself. Others are just like a mirror to oneself. The way we treat others will mirror back. Always being aware of the cause rather than waiting for the effect. Bodhisattvas are ever presently mindful, preventing unwholesomeness before it arises, and instigating wholesomeness by being the cause for positive change. So far, we have discussed in brevity the prescriptive aspects of Shila and discussed how preclusive precepts are preventative measures that Bodhisattvas take to avoid harm to oneself and other. What we have covered so far is only the tip of the iceberg, as Shila or morality encompasses many more teachings than what we have covered so far. It includes other doctrines of practice that we have not had the opportunity to cover within this session or course. But I invite everyone to be brave and apply the prescriptive precepts in your daily life and see for yourselves the wonderful benefits of positive living. In the meantime, take care, stay safe, and continue with your practice with diligence. Blessings to all.